Hello and welcome to Air Warfare Digital Magazine, Issue 6. I'm Noemi Di Stefano, multimedia journalist here at Shephard Media. As we come to the end of what has been a seismic year, to say the least, with COVID-19 affecting the business environment worldwide and the defense sector battling to stay afloat, we wanted to draw the attention of our listeners and viewers to some of the main stories which have filled the pages of our air domain publications this year. And to do so, I'm joined by air editor Tim Martin. Hi, Tim.
Hi, Noemi.
So, Tim, today our conversation menu includes a discussion around 5 features, the top 5 features which we think you should not miss. So, we will look at sixth generation fighters, stealth platforms, future vertical lift programs, heavy lift helicopters, and next generation loitering munitions. Tim, just before we start to dive into these topics in a little bit of more detail, I just wanted to set the background with a little bit of a broad question, and I wanted to take a look at back in January before the pandemic started. And would you say the air sector and the air market has been strongly or badly impacted by COVID-19, or would you say it has somehow held out?
I think, relatively speaking, there hasn't been too much of a dip in terms of business for the defence sector, certainly from the air side. I think when the pandemic began, there was an expectation that there was going to be lots of disruption to manufacturing and supply chain. And, we have heard of kind of isolated incidents whereby small suppliers have suffered economic turbulence and been troubled by it. But by and large, the bigger manufacturers and the likes of certainly fighter jet manufacturers in particular, they've only been prevented from their daily business insofar as having to do things like deep cleans or having to suspend production from 3 or 4 days to up to a week in some cases. And then you look at the likes of Lockheed Martin revising their annual delivery forecast from reduced by between 18 to 24 units, they'd said earlier in the year. While that's a significant hit, of course, and you think that an F-35 is anywhere between 80 to 85 million dollars, then of course multiplying that by 18 is very significant. But because there's such a big company, they'll look to increase production then in 2021 and 2022. So, yes, while there's a hit at present, long term, there looks to be they look to be on safer ground. So I think, yeah, just to kind of go back, the analysis or the projections and the fears of analysts perhaps in the earlier days was that there was big problems ahead, but I don't think those have been realized, and certainly big programs have been keeping to contract, and there have been a number of key awards throughout 2020. And yes, of course, there's been one or two cancellations. You think of the German heavy lift program,
Yeah.
for example. But I don't think by and large that there's been any huge upset in terms of cancellations or business suffering in terms of the big ticket items, let's say.
So it has somehow held out in the end.
Yes, I think so. By and large, that would be the headline.
Okay, let's move to our first topic and let's talk about sixth generation jet fighters. Several countries are currently developing sixth generation air programs, but I wanted to focus on the UK and Europe with the Tempest and the Future Combat Air System programs, respectively. And I wanted to ask you, where are we at and what are the expectations?
Yeah, good question. So, in terms of where we're at, we've known for some time that these projects you mentioned, Tempest and FCAS, are due to enter service from 2035 to 2040, since they were unveiled. So, Tempest, for example, was first announced at the Farnborough Air Show, and then a year later, then at the Paris Air Show. Um, President Macron and the and others formally announced FCAS. So we've known the kind of the main milestones in terms of service entry, but there's less detail behind the actual concepts themselves. Of a manned fighter and the associated systems. We do know that key to both will be remote carriers and combat clouds, and so we know that manufacturers are working behind the scenes on those. But for example, what we don't know is the exact stealth profile of manned fighter, and how how the design trade-offs that typically go hand in hand with the development of a next generation fighter, how those are progressing. I think for Tempest, we do know from a budgeting side that the extra investment that was announced by the UK government, 16.5 billion in November, over 4 years. Some of that money is going to be invested in Tempest, so obviously that's a positive sign. But there's still the outline business case to be submitted, and that is effectively the MOD presenting evidence to the government to say that the potential of Tempest fits with the UK combat air strategy that was announced in 2018, and that it is on course to be successful, and the government should therefore should have confidence in proceeding with the program. So that's kind of I suppose the political side of it.
Yeah.
But we do know that items like remote carriers and combat clouds will be particularly important. And so on that front, when we talk about remote carriers, we're thinking of UAVs effectively with variable payloads and that are either recoverable or expendable. And the use case, I guess, is that they can fly in more dangerous situations compared to manned fighters. And they can successfully achieve mission objectives without risking the loss of life. And on then the idea of a combat cloud, this is effectively connectivity and issues based on interlinking all airborne platforms under a kind of system of systems approach. So the expectation is then that the manned fighter can handle vast swathes of mission data and kind of more comprehensively than previous generations or previous earlier fighter jets like Eurofighter Typhoon.
Okay. And are sixth generation jets set to replace current inventories, or will they complement countries' current fleets?
Yeah, good question. So they are absolutely a successor to airframes that are going to be retired, legacy airframes. So in the UK's case, for example, Eurofighter Typhoon, the Eurofighter Typhoon fleet will be replaced with what comes next with Tempest. And so there is a wider question as to whether it will be a like-for-like replacement, because there is a debate, let's say, on the fact that from a budget perspective, and if you're going to develop a next generation fighter, then of course the costs will be significantly more expensive than previous procurements. And so the feeling is that the way around that is to generate combat mass, and that's effectively what's happening here in both the case of Tempest and FCAS, where not only will a manned fighter be built, or at least that's the idea at this stage, but they'll be built alongside the low cost UAVs.
And I know that you said there is a little bit of uncertainty, but when would you say, what do we know about when we will see these core technologies fielded by? Do we have any indication of that?
Yeah, so there is prototyping and test and demonstration phase expected in 5 to 10 years. So we'll should get a good read on those types of things within that time frame. But as we know, because there's partner nations involved, and we've seen difficulties previously where, particularly on Eurofighter, some countries lean towards having more high-end capabilities, and so it becomes a little truncated in terms of development. And there is, of course, we should also mention that there is potential for delays with these types of things.
Yeah, and we will continue reporting. You will continue reporting on sixth generation fighters, obviously, in 2021. And I want to move to our next topic now, which is stealth platforms. I can never say that word correctly. So I wanted to ask you, how are stealth platforms such as sixth generation fighters and the latest generation of unmanned aircraft evolving to meet the demands of modern air combat environments?
Yeah, so I mean, the basic premise with stealth, and it is, it's core to all of these things, is that if you're able to reduce the electromagnetic energy that you're sending to enemy radar, then you can fly the mission and be more survivable and less vulnerable to attack. And so that is the kind of the guiding principle of using stealth materials for new combat air designs. And those types of ideas are absolutely front and center for both FCAS and Tempest. Now, what we don't have a read on is whether they'll be considered all stealth designs, and whether they'll be low observable and things like that. And it will be difficult to understand how those trade-offs are made. But I suppose we will get a firm reading on it when there is a reveal of a manned platform. As I say, not exactly sure when that happens, but it is worth flagging that manufacturers, chief engineers within the programs are talking about stealth and its importance. So.
And you have put together a very interesting feature for this very issue of air warfare. So I encourage our listeners to go and read that. You can find it on shepherdmedia.com. I wanted to now go to talk about Future Vertical Lift program. I know you've been following this one very closely. So very quick background to this US effort. Why is it a pillar program for the US and who are the competitors today?
Yep. So Future Vertical Lift has been going on for quite some time, back to the joint multi-role tech demonstrator phase back in 2012, 2013. It's an effort run by the US Army, and it is effectively looking to modernize rotary fleets. And in particular, the US Army is hoping through the FARA program, the Future Attack Reconnaissance Aircraft, to give it its full title, to shore up a capability gap, for a light scout capability gap, and then for the future long range assault aircraft, that's a replacement for Blackhawks. So in effect, you've got two parallel programs running at once and under Future Vertical Lift. And so we've reached a stage, certainly with FARA, where we're down to being very close to finding out who's going to win, because we have two competitors, those being Sikorsky with the Radar X, which is an enlarged version, of the S-97 coaxial helicopter, and then Bell's 360 Invictus. Both of those were down selected in March of 2020, and so they'll go on to be formally tested and then selected and put into operations sometime around 2028 onward.
It's time now for a talk about heavy lift helicopters. I know you mentioned Germany just earlier. So I just wanted to recap a little bit our reports on this. So in issue 3 of Air Warfare back in June, you wrote a feature called Heavyweight Defense, which focused on the competition between Boeing and Sikorsky over two significant export orders to Germany and Israel with their respective CH-47F Chinook and CH-53K King Stallion. So I wanted to focus on Germany in particular because a lot has been happening. So what's been happening?
Yeah, Germany's a good one to focus on because they've been looking for some time to replace a fleet of CH-53G aircraft. Between 44 to 60 aircraft are going to be replaced, and the budget is 6.4 billion euro, and it's been already approved by Parliament. But yes, just earlier this year, then there was a big announcement from Germany that it was cancelling the program, and the reasons behind that was because they had close examination of industry offers, and they had cited budget difficulties, and that means that the MOD in Germany will miss a scheduled contract award of 2021, and so they're now going to re-examine requirements and look at changing the specifications of the procurement. If you would like kind of a more layman terms version of what that seems to mean, it looks to me that the overall budget, as I mentioned, 6.4 billion, was just not enough here, and that there was a miscalculation on the part of the German MOD, and I think industry then have kind of made it clear that this just isn't feasible. Now, I do want to preface that by saying that neither the MOD or those from industry have said that to me. That is simply my take on matters because they've cited budget difficulties. But I think what will be interesting is that there really is only two aircraft in town when you talk about heavy lift aircraft, and that is Sikorsky's King Stallion and Boeing CH-47F, and so you can absolutely expect both of those to be in the running once the tender is resurrected.
Well, I wanted to ask you. I know we talked about this. You talked about this with Richard Thomas in an episode of the Weekly Defense podcast. I just wanted to ask you, what did competitors say about the cancellation?
I mean, they said they expressed disappointment, but they said that they'll be ready to return with new offers once the procurement has been restarted. Yeah, I mean, they weren't given anything extra away on that front, and I guess you wouldn't expect them to either.
Would you say that this for Germany, in terms of like a larger scale impact, would you say that this decision would have any reputational damage for the country?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an essential piece of kit for Germany, and the fact that the 53G fleet is getting very long in the tooth will be very concerning, because you're into all types of issues from a maintenance perspective with an older fleet, and looking to receive spares from Sikorsky and things like that. And it's really it pushes your readiness it really tests that.
Okay, and we will keep a close look on what's next for Germany from here. Let's move to the latest topic of the day, loitering munitions. I have to say, Tim, I really love loitering munitions. I put a video together for one of the previous issues of Air Warfare. They are absolutely my favorite. I don't know, there's something about them I really like. So a totally different set of equipment for armies. And why would you say this is an emerging field that is growing globally?
I think from a market perspective, the companies who are manufacturing loitering munitions are well aware of the fact that they can do so as an alternative to the more expensive fire and forget munitions, and so they're looking in effect to undercut that market. I think that's a big play from manufacturers, um, certainly.
What what is on offer out there in terms of loitering munition at the moment?
Yeah, so you have war meat, for example, and you also have a packed inventory from AeroVironment coming forward with quite a family of loitering munitions, and so I think the real test is the quantities by which air forces buy these types of munitions. That will be the acid test for manufacturers, because you certainly can come forward with new designs and new products, but it's then the number of contracts that are signed based on those product releases that will determine the success from a manufacturing standpoint.
Yeah, on this front is also really interesting. A recent story from one of our freelancers on how the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict has basically shed light on new procurement strategies, and there are some lessons learned from the use of loitering munitions in that context. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next. Tim, thank you for this interesting conversation today. This is all we've got time for. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Melanie. Pleasure.
For our listeners, if you would like to find out more about the previous issues of Air Warfare and other publications, you can do so by visiting our website, shepherdmedia.com, or by downloading the Shepherd Media app on your smartphone, available on Google Play and App Store. That's all for now, and until next time, thanks for watching.